This photograph captures a moment of absolute chaos frozen into a single frame, taken on a Washington sidewalk in the early afternoon of March 30th, 1981. What looks at first glance like a crime scene from a film is, in fact, a real assassination attempt on a sitting president of the United States. The man lying face down on the concrete is Robert Wenko, a United States Secret Service agent. Around him are fellow agents, police officers, and bystanders, all reacting in the first seconds after gunfire erupted just outside the Washington Hilton Hotel. Moments before this image was taken, President Ronald Reagan had finished speaking at a luncheon inside the hotel. As he exited the building and walked toward his armored limousine, the scene appeared routine. Reporters shouted questions. Photographers raised their cameras. Secret Service agents scanned the crowd with practiced focus. Then, without warning, 6 shots rang out in less than 2 seconds. The sound echoed off the hotel walls, sharp and unmistakable. Panic followed instantly. The shooter was John Hinckley Jr., standing among the press. He fired a small-caliber revolver at close range, aiming not only at the president but firing wildly into the protective formation surrounding him. One bullet struck Press Secretary James Brady in the head. Another hit a police officer. Another struck a Secret Service agent. Robert Wenko was one of the first agents hit, collapsing onto the pavement where this photograph shows him moments later. In the image, Wenko lies motionless, his arms stretched forward, his body twisted unnaturally. His suit is dark, his face pressed close to the ground. Around him, other agents are already responding, kneeling, reaching, shouting orders. One man grips a submachine gun, scanning the area for additional threats, unsure whether the attack is over. The weapon, compact and unmistakable, reflects the reality of the era. This was the Cold War, a time when the threat of political violence was never abstract. Behind the agents, the presidential limousine sits with its door open, just feet away. Reagan had already been pushed inside, shielded by agents who did not yet know he had been shot. At first, the president himself believed he was unharmed, thinking the pain in his chest was caused by a blow or a fall. In reality, a bullet had ricocheted off the limousine and entered his body under the arm, narrowly missing his heart. The photograph does not show the shooter. It does not show the president. Instead, it focuses on the cost of protection. Robert Wenko was doing exactly what he had been trained to do: move toward danger, place himself between gunfire and the president, and neutralize the threat. He paid for that duty with his body hitting the pavement. In that instant, his identity as an agent disappears, replaced by vulnerability. He is no longer a shield. He is a wounded man. The expressions of those around him tell the story without words. Faces are tense, focused, alarmed. There is no screaming visible, no theatrical gestures. This is controlled panic, drilled into professionals who know that every second matters. One agent appears to be checking Wenko's condition. Another is already securing the perimeter. The scene is disordered, yet purposeful. Training takes over when shock threatens to paralyze. This image also reflects how exposed public life was at the time. The president was walking in the open, separated from the public by little more than a rope line and a few feet of space. Today, such proximity would be unthinkable. The attempt on Reagan's life changed security protocols permanently. Distances increased. Access tightened. Spontaneity disappeared. This photograph represents the moment that illusion of safety collapsed. Robert Wenko survived his injuries. So did Ronald Reagan. James Brady survived as well, though he was left permanently disabled, a consequence that would later influence national debates on gun violence. The attack itself failed in its ultimate goal, but its impact was lasting. It reshaped how America viewed presidential vulnerability and the invisible people tasked with preventing tragedy. What makes this photograph powerful is its rawness. There is no staging, no angle chosen for symbolism. It is messy, abrupt, and uncomfortable. The concrete is dirty. The bodies are awkwardly positioned. The luxury car in the background contrasts sharply with the violence unfolding beside it. Power and fragility exist in the same frame. This image reminds the viewer that history often turns on seconds and inches. A slight change in angle, a fraction of a second delay, and the outcome could have been very different. The photograph does not show a dramatic climax. It shows the aftermath, when the reality of violence settles in and professionals move without hesitation, knowing that hesitation costs lives. In the end, This is not just a picture of an assassination attempt. It is a portrait of duty under fire, of the hidden price paid by those who stand between leaders and chaos. Robert Wanko is not remembered as a headline name, but this image ensures that his role, his fall, and his survival remain part of the visual memory of one of the most dangerous days in modern American political history. The aircraft in this photograph lies half buried in shallow coastal water, its wings stretched out like a relic frozen in time. The sand beneath it is smooth and pale, shaped by decades of tides, while the sea around it is calm and almost transparent, revealing the dark silhouette of metal beneath the surface. This is not a model, not a reconstruction, and not a museum exhibit. It is a real American fighter plane from the Second World War, a Lockheed P-38 Lightning, resting where history left it and where nature quietly preserved it for more than 70 years. The P-38 was one of the most distinctive aircraft of the war. Its twin booms, central cockpit, and wide wingspan made it instantly recognizable in the skies over Europe and the Pacific. Built for speed, range, and firepower, it was used as a fighter, bomber escort, and reconnaissance aircraft. Thousands of these planes were produced, and many were lost in combat, training accidents, or emergency landings. Most disappeared forever. A few, like this one, were swallowed by water and sand instead of fire and explosion, which gave them a chance to survive. This aircraft made an emergency landing near the Welsh coast during the war. The exact circumstances were never dramatic in the cinematic sense. There was no dogfight captured on film, no heroic last stand. What happened instead was far more common during the war. Mechanical failure, fuel problems, or navigational error. The pilot brought the aircraft down on the tidal flats, survived, and the plane was later stripped of anything valuable or reusable. Then it was abandoned. As the war moved on and eventually ended, the sea reclaimed the site. Over the decades, tides covered the plane again and again. Sand filled the cockpit, wrapped around the fuselage, and locked the wings in place. Salt water corroded the aluminum slowly but evenly. Unlike planes that crash into forests or fields, this one was sealed under wet sand for most of its existence, protected from oxygen and human interference. That is why, even after so many decades, the shape remains so clear. The wings are still attached. The twin booms are still aligned. From above, the aircraft is unmistakable. For generations, the plane was invisible. Local fishermen and walkers passed by without knowing what lay beneath their feet. Occasionally, parts of metal would appear after storms, only to vanish again under the next tide. It was not until unusually low tides and shifting sands exposed the full outline that the aircraft truly revealed itself. When aerial photographs began circulating, people immediately recognized what they were seeing. A warplane, untouched by restoration, lying exactly where it had landed in the 1940s. What makes this image powerful is not just the aircraft itself, but the contrast between its purpose and its current state. This machine was designed for speed, aggression, and dominance of the sky. It once carried heavy guns, roaring engines, and a trained pilot into hostile airspace. Now it lies silent, its engines long gone, its weapons removed, its mission ended. The sea does not care what it once was. The sand treats it like any other object, slowly absorbing it into the landscape. There is also something unsettling in how complete it looks. Many wartime wrecks are broken, scattered, or twisted beyond recognition. This one appears almost intact, as if it could be lifted, cleaned, and made ready again. That illusion makes the reality even stronger. Time has stopped for the aircraft, but not for the world around it. Modern beaches, modern people, and modern technology now surround a machine built for a global conflict that ended generations ago. This photograph captures a moment of rare clarity. The water is shallow enough to show the entire structure. The light is soft, highlighting the pale sand and the darker metal beneath. There is no dramatic sky, no human figure for scale. The plane stands alone, stripped of context, which forces the viewer to confront its history directly. It is a reminder that the Second World War is not just stories, films, or textbooks. Physical remnants are still out there, hidden in forests, fields, oceans, and riverbeds. The P-38 Lightning was flown by thousands of young men, many barely out of their teens. Some returned home. Many did not. This aircraft survived its crew, its war, and the world that built it. It outlasted the factories that produced it and the command structures that ordered it into the air. What remains is not a symbol of victory or defeat, but of endurance and memory. Eventually, The sea will take this aircraft completely. Corrosion will weaken the structure. Sand will collapse the remaining cavities. One day, nothing recognizable will remain. That is the natural end of most abandoned objects. Until then, images like this freeze the moment when history briefly surfaces, allowing us to look directly at it before it disappears again. This photograph shows a small, ordinary object that carries an extraordinary weight of history. A pocket watch rests upright on a clear stand, its metal case worn and slightly tarnished, its glass face yellowed by time. The Roman numerals are still visible. The chain is coiled neatly at its base. At first glance, it looks like any antique watch displayed behind museum glass. But the detail that transforms it from a collectible into a relic is the position of its hands. They are frozen at exactly 2:28 in the morning. That time marks the final moments of the RMS Titanic. On the night of April 14, 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic. Less than 3 hours later, in the early hours of April 15th, the ship slipped beneath the surface of the ocean. 2:28 a.m. is widely recognized as the moment when the vessel was fully gone, its stern lifting briefly into the air before disappearing into darkness and freezing water. For over 1,500 people, it was the moment their lives ended. This watch was recovered decades later from the wreck site, resting on the ocean floor more than 12,000 feet below the surface. When it was brought back up, examined, and cleaned, one detail stood out immediately. The mechanism had stopped not randomly, not hours later, not days later, but precisely at the moment the ship went under. Salt water flooded the casing, pressure crushed delicate components, and the movement ceased. Time, for this object, ended when the Titanic did. The power of this image lies in its simplicity. There is no dramatic scene, no bodies, no wreckage, no chaos. Just a quiet, motionless watch. Yet it represents panic on icy decks, lifeboats lowered into black water, music playing as the ship tilted, and thousands of individual final moments unfolding simultaneously. While people screamed, prayed, fought, or froze in shock, this watch continued ticking, unaware of human fear, until the ocean itself forced it to stop. Pocket watches were common at the time. They were practical tools, symbols of punctuality and order in a world that believed deeply in progress and precision. The Titanic itself was a triumph of that belief. It was engineered with confidence bordering on arrogance, advertised as virtually unsinkable. The watch and the ship shared the same philosophy. Mastery over time, nature, and fate. Both were proven wrong that night. The watch likely belonged to a passenger or crew member. Someone who boarded the Titanic expecting an uneventful crossing, perhaps checking the time before dinner, before sleep, before stepping out onto the deck. We do not know their name from the watch alone. There is no engraving visible in the photograph. That anonymity makes it more powerful. It could have belonged to anyone. A businessman, a steward, a father, a son, a stranger whose final minutes are lost to history, except for this frozen moment. When the Titanic sank, it did so slowly enough for time to matter. People checked their watches. Officers timed lifeboat launches. Wireless operators tracked minutes as they sent distress signals. Survivors later recalled glancing at clocks as the ship tilted further, trying to understand how much time they had left. In disasters, time becomes distorted. Seconds feel endless. Minutes vanish instantly. This watch captures that distortion perfectly. It marks a precise second, yet represents an eternity of suffering. The fact that the watch stopped just 2 minutes after full submersion adds another layer of meaning. It suggests that even after the ship was gone, the mechanism continued briefly, trapped in darkness, surrounded by water, still functioning until pressure and corrosion overwhelmed it. In that sense, the watch outlived the Titanic itself, even if only by moments. It is a mechanical witness to the end. Today, this watch is preserved behind glass, photographed under controlled lighting, admired by visitors who know the outcome of the story. That distance makes it safe. But when it was last ticking, there was no safety, no certainty, no rescue nearby. The owner was surrounded by freezing seawater or chaos on deck. The calm stillness of the photograph hides the violence of the event it represents. Objects like this watch endure because they are honest. They do not exaggerate. They do not dramatize. They simply exist. Unlike written accounts, they cannot be influenced by memory or emotion. The hands stopped where they stopped. They will never move again. No interpretation can change that. It is one of the few pieces of the Titanic disaster that tells the story without words. The watch also reminds us how thin the line is between everyday life and catastrophe. One moment, this was a functional object, part of someone's routine. The next, it became a historical artifact, destined to lie in darkness for more than 70 years before being seen again. Millions of similar watches existed. Only this one carries this particular time. In a broader sense, the image represents the illusion of control. Humans measure time to feel in command of their lives. We schedule, plan, and predict. The Titanic was planned to the minute. Its voyage was timed. Its arrival was anticipated. Yet none of that mattered when steel met ice. The watch did its job perfectly until reality made time irrelevant. This photograph does not show the sinking itself. It does not need to. The stopped hands say everything. 2:28 a.m. is not just a timestamp. It is a boundary between confidence and humility, between the belief in invincibility and the proof of human limits. The watch does not ask for attention, but once seen, it is impossible to forget. In the end, this image is not about a ship or a mechanism. It is about the moment when progress failed, when nature asserted itself, and when thousands of individual lives were reduced to a single frozen time. The watch remains silent, but its message is clear. Some moments are so final that even time itself stops with them. This photograph captures a sky filled with parachutes, each one carrying an American paratrooper descending toward the ground during the invasion of Panama in 1989. The scene looks almost unreal at first glance. Dozens of canopies float against a pale sky, spread unevenly, some clustered, some drifting apart, all moving downward at different speeds. Transport aircraft are still visible overhead, continuing to release troops into the airspace. Below them lies unfamiliar terrain, flat and exposed, waiting for soldiers who have only seconds left before impact. This image was taken during Operation Just Cause, a United States military intervention launched in December 1989. The objective was clear and direct. Remove Manuel Noriega, the de facto leader of Panama, who had been accused by the United States of drug trafficking, corruption, and suppressing democratic opposition. The operation was fast, overwhelming, and deliberately decisive. Airborne troops were a critical part of that strategy. Paratroopers are deployed when speed matters more than comfort, and when control of key locations must be established immediately. In Panama, American forces targeted airfields, military bases, and strategic infrastructure before the Panamanian Defense Forces could organize a coordinated response. Dropping soldiers directly from the sky allowed the United States to seize control within hours rather than days. In the photograph, every parachute represents an individual soldier suspended between aircraft and ground, between planning and reality. At this moment, each paratrooper is completely exposed. There is no cover, no concealment, no ability to maneuver beyond small adjustments in direction. If ground fire were present, there would be little defense. This vulnerability is one of the defining features of airborne operations. Once the jump begins, there is no turning back. The scale of the drop is striking. This is not a small reconnaissance unit or a limited insertion. It is a mass deployment, designed to overwhelm through numbers and coordination. Multiple aircraft release waves of troops in sequence, filling the sky and saturating the drop zone. The visual density of parachutes reflects the doctrine behind the operation. Shock, speed, and dominance. Each soldier descending here carries more than just personal gear. They carry weapons, ammunition, radios, medical supplies, and mission-specific equipment. Many land with heavy packs that make the final seconds before touchdown dangerous. Parachute landings are violent even under ideal conditions. Ankles break. Knees buckle. Collisions happen. And this is before combat even begins. The photograph does not show what happens next, but history fills in the gap. Once on the ground, paratroopers had to regroup quickly, locate their units, and move toward assigned objectives. Night drops, confusion, scattered landings, and unfamiliar terrain made those first minutes critical. A soldier who failed to orient himself could be isolated, injured, or captured. Training was the only thing standing between order and chaos. The invasion of Panama was controversial from the start. The United States justified it on several grounds: protecting American citizens, defending democracy, combating drug trafficking, and safeguarding the Panama Canal. Critics questioned the legality, the civilian casualties, and the broader message it sent about American interventionism. Supporters pointed to the rapid collapse of Noriega's regime and the limited duration of major combat operations. What this photograph does not show are civilians. Panama was not an empty battlefield. Cities, neighborhoods, and families existed beneath these parachutes. Combat would take place near homes, businesses, and streets filled with people who had no control over the geopolitical decisions that brought foreign soldiers into their country. Airborne assaults are precise in planning but blunt in impact. The image also reflects the late Cold War mindset. 1989 was a turning point year globally. The Berlin Wall fell. Eastern Europe shifted. Yet here, in Central America, the United States was still conducting large-scale military interventions using doctrines developed decades earlier. Paratroopers falling from the sky were a reminder that traditional power projection was still very much alive. There is a strange calm in the photograph. The parachutes appear almost graceful, drifting silently despite the violence that surrounds their purpose. That calm is deceptive. Inside each harness is a soldier whose heart rate is elevated, whose focus is absolute, whose mind is cycling through procedures learned through repetition. Fear exists, but it is controlled, compartmentalized, pushed aside by muscle memory. For many of the soldiers involved, this jump would become one of the defining moments of their lives. Some would remember the silence after exiting the aircraft. Others would remember the sudden rush of air, the snap of the parachute opening, the brief sense of weightlessness. A few would remember injuries, firefights, or the loss of comrades in the hours that followed. Operation Just Cause achieved its immediate goals quickly. Noriega was removed from power, later captured, and transported to the United States. A new government was installed. From a military perspective, the operation demonstrated overwhelming superiority and coordination between air, ground, and special forces. From a human perspective, it left scars that statistics and official reports rarely capture. This photograph freezes the moment before consequences unfold. It shows intent rather than outcome. It shows preparation rather than aftermath. There are no explosions, no wounded, no ruins. Just parachutes, aircraft, and sky. That simplicity makes it powerful. It reminds the viewer that every conflict begins with movement, with orders carried out by individuals who may not fully control the larger narrative. In the end, this image is about transition. Soldiers are leaving the safety of the aircraft and entering uncertainty. A country is about to experience invasion. History is shifting from planning to action. The parachutes fill the sky like punctuation marks in a sentence written by governments but lived by people on the ground. Once the soldiers land, the photograph's calm disappears. What remains is noise, confusion, and irreversible change. This image captures the last quiet seconds before that transformation, when gravity does its work and history descends, one parachute at a time.